Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and today we are here to discuss a new 3D Mario game that we have both finished, and that is, of course, Bowser's Fury. Now, before we get into the review discussion that we're about to embark on with you, if you want to take the conversation a bit further, talk to us about some more Nintendo stuff, some movies, play some Minecraft. We have our own Minecraft server. Join our Discord link as always, top of the description. But Tucker, we're no longer here to do social media plugs.
No.
We're not here to solicit ourselves for subscriptions, but we would. If you wanted to give us one, we would. We're here to talk about Bowser's Fury, and we've both beaten the game. You
Sure.
have 100% of it.
Yes, I have.
I have 50% of it. I
You have
beat the
50
game with
shines?
50. Yes.
Wow, that's oddly specific.
Well, yeah, because I think 50 is at it's at like 45. It triggers the event where you can no longer bat away Fury Bowser with just one cat shine. So I got all 50, got the Gigabella, and fucking knocked his teeth out of his throat
Okay.
and beat the game. So I haven't 100%ed it, but I have beaten it. I've gotten credits, got the final boss and everything. So I think we're ready to give a little bit of a review.
Yeah. And
How do
I
you
do
like it?
think that it's important for us to review this separately because in my mind it's an entirely different game. Of course, it's a lot smaller than any other 3D Mario experience we've gotten before, but I perceive this to be an entirely separate experience. I have it cataloged and logged on my backlog as such. It
Sure.
has its own separate file, and I'm counting it as that because this is surprisingly different from other Mario things we've gotten,
Definitely.
but certainly pulls inspiration from across the series, and I find that very interesting.
So I saw that you had given the game 4 stars
Mhm.
out of 5 on backlogged. I put it on my backlog last night, but I didn't have time to write a review. I'm going to
Sure.
be giving it 3.5 stars personally. I'm
Okay.
teetering actually between 3 and 3.5. So you're definitely more positive on Bowser's Fury than I am. But I think, like you said, this is not only a different Mario experience, but it's a surprisingly cinematic one. It's one that has a lot of its own ideas, and I think a lot to discuss and a lot to draw on in terms of where Mario is going to go. But in the context of Bowser's Fury itself, I think that this is a really unrefined game. I think it
Hmm.
has a lot of either bad or not or poorly thought out design decisions
Hmm.
that, in my opinion, hamper what is, on the whole, I think a pretty fun sandbox platforming challenge.
Hmm.
I really like a lot of elements here, but I just don't think there's a lot of glue actually holding them together.
Yeah, I do think there's some interesting design flaws that I think I probably am a little more equipped to notice as I did every challenge in the game.
Yeah.
Um, Namely, and spoilers, quote unquote, for Bowser's Fury. But once you do beat the game, and you click resume on your file, you unlock a total set of new challenges. That are spread
Oh,
across
okay.
the map. Because the most you can get in your first playthrough is 75 shines. The
Hmm.
last 15 are locked behind that, beating the boss fight and coming back to it. And 5 of those are called the Lucky Isle shines, which is an island that randomly spawns in different locations that you can
Okay.
only access while Fury Bowser is attacking you. And it means that you have to sit there and wait for Fury Bowser to show up in order to get him at all, which is very frustrating. And some of those shines, like the ones caught behind the Fury blocks, things like that, I think the mechanic of Fury Bowser showing up every 5 or 6 minutes, whatever, is I think interesting in concept, but pretty poorly executed in execution.
Yeah.
Because I found that time limit to be something that I ended up sitting around waiting for more often than not.
I like elements of Fury Bowser because I think he gives the world a sense of dynamic presence we don't usually get in a lot of Mario sandboxes,
Hmm.
which is really cool, but it's so underutilized. It becomes
Yeah.
very one note. It becomes, okay, here's some Fury blocks. I know basically beyond a shadow of a doubt there's going to be a cat shine behind these
Hmm.
or
Well,
a
I
pipe.
think they almost literally always are. Yeah, some of them
They
hide
Some of them will
pipes or
have
things like that. Yeah,
yeah, but you know that,
which gets you to a
okay,
shine.
yes. You know, here's some blocks. I gotta wait for Bowser to show up, have him spit his fire at me. If I get hit, it doesn't really matter because I'll just use one of my other umpteen bajillion power-ups.
Hmm.
I'll get through the blocks, I get the cat shine, it'll bink him on the forehead and he'll fly away a la Team
He just goes
Rocket.
like, "Argh," and he like stumbles off into the goop.
Yeah, and he'll show back up a couple minutes later, and I think that's emblematic of the fact that Bowser's Fury, I feel, is pretty repetitive.
Mhm.
It feels in a lot of ways. I was thinking about this. If you remember, the Zelda team was talking about when they were making Breath of the Wild, they made this like this 2D Zelda, almost NES style prototype where they're able to mess around with ideas.
Sure.
It felt to me like Bowser's Fury was the Mario team taking a pre-existing template and just throwing in ideas
Hmm.
and just getting a feel for themselves how these things would work before refining them for the public. So I just don't know how strong in a vacuum Bowser's Fury is, in my opinion, because you run into a lot of repeated mission types. There's
Yeah.
very few actual types of shines. There are very few that take a concerted effort to collect.
Hmm.
A lot of them are incredibly basic. I don't feel like power-ups are implemented especially well. I
Yeah.
don't feel like Fury Bowser is implemented especially well. I think a lot of the fun of this game comes from the fact that 3D Mario is just fun.
Yeah.
And he's fun to control. It's fun to be sliding around as Plessy. I love Plessy. So
Yeah.
it's really fun to it's fun to
Or
be
Yonkadingo, to quote one video game donkey.
yes. It's
Tanner calls Plessy Yonkadingo because he doesn't understand what Plessy means.
sure. So I think it's fun, but I think a lot of the fun is derived from the series itself,
Hmm.
opposed to actually what Bowser's Fury is doing.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things that I take from Bowser's Furious design philosophy overall. And I'm like, okay, those are good concepts that I think can be fleshed out into something more meaningful, more meaty in the context of a larger experience. I think that the idea of Fury Bowser um showing up and impacting the world in interesting ways. He sends down a bunch of blocks that can sometimes get you to new areas
Yeah.
easier. There's access to new power-ups. You do have to change how you interact with the world in minor ways. Like you have to hide when he's shooting his fire beam and stuff like that. So I think that is all really cool. And I do like the fact that it's sort of a continuing boss fight. In some ways it does remind me of Calamity Ganon in the fact that you can continually damage him with cat
Yeah.
shines until you do the boss fight, and that makes that boss fight easier. So there's a interesting parallel there. But I also like the inventory of power-ups. I think the idea of being able to cycle through power-ups when the mood suits you and when the situation strikes is very interesting. And
Yeah.
playing through 3D World now, it feels a little bit restrictive in the one item power-up slot. And I'm sort of missing the ability to switch on the fly. But I also think that that comes with the drawback of the fact the power ups aren't particularly useful or integral to a lot of the challenges in Bowser's Fury. I don't think I ever used the boomerang flower, and the mushrooms were just there because they're a power up, and,
Yeah.
and not because they're actually useful to any particular thing. And unfortunately, that also just points out that those power ups aren't as useful as the cat bell, which is intensely useful. It's
Yes.
every situation can use it. It makes you faster. It makes you climb better. It can help you skip things. Like there's a feeling of imbalance throughout the power ups, especially within the game, and I started feeling that more and more as I was going through each of the sort of more end game challenges, where I thought, okay, maybe they'll start incorporating them a little more. Maybe the boomerang flower will be used in interesting ways. Maybe I'll need to use fire flowers, but instead, I just realized, no, I can just stick with the cat suit. No, I'll be good.
Yeah, I want to drill into that. I also want to do something here. Here, watch this. So this is a 500 IQ strat, okay? I'm going to take my microphone, which is balanced on this Bowser Jr. amiibo I've yet to open. Shout out to Target's amiibo restocks. Put my ring light on this side. Watch this, okay? Doesn't that look better?
I can't tell.
I think it looks better. Because I've got a light source over here.
Yeah, it's called a window.
I know. This is called deliberate design, which is something I think Bowser's Fury is lacking. And I think the power up point
Reasonable
is,
transition there.
but I want to talk about the power ups a little bit more because I think you're totally right. And I personally think that power ups are way better in the core 3D world game because those are tailored challenges.
Hmm.
Same with think about Odyssey's captures. The captures are placed in those sandboxes in very deliberate ways.
Yeah.
And here they're not. but the game is kind of designed in a way that regardless of what power up you have, you can basically do any challenge.
Hmm.
It reminds me of a less elegant version of Breath of the Wild's design philosophy, where the game is basically designed in a way where with the very basic tool set the Link has, you can basically do anything in the game.
Yeah, sure.
It's the same in Bowser's Fury, but it feels a lot less impactful.
I think it's
So
because there's no creativity to using those basic tools.
precisely, and there's a perfect example of this. Once you want to get, I think it's when you get the final big map upgrade, and there's like the sunken ship you ride up as
Yeah,
Plessy. There's this like waterfall cliff, and do you remember the shine where you're at the bottom and the shine's at the top of this waterfall? You hit a button and it basically spawns like a series of platforms you can platform
sure.
up to get to
Yeah,
the shine. But there's also just a cat ramp that you can just walk up the ramp and you can get the shine in literally three
I
seconds.
remember that one. Yeah.
And I was
And I
like,
remember
what?
thinking, why would they circumvent their own challenge in this way? Because if there had been a separate section that allowed you to use the cat power up in an interesting way, that was
Yes.
still mildly challenging. Uh, but I mean, you're gonna have a cat bell or two or three or four or five at that point. So it does circumvent their own design in that way, and it's a little bit strange.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to the fact that this game is it feels like a brainstorm. It feels like here's a bunch of really interesting ideas. What if
Hmm.
Mario basically had Batman's utility belt and it was full
Sure.
of
Yeah.
all of his power-ups? I think that's a really interesting idea. I think that opens up interesting design possibilities. A persistent boss that you're continually fighting and
Hmm.
who affects the world, that's very interesting also.
Hmm.
You know, having a more interconnected Mario world
Hmm.
also very interesting. I think a
Yeah.
lot of these ideas are very interesting. It's just that a laundry list of ideas without a lot of cohesion feels a little bit more like a Super Mario Sunshine to me than a Super
Hmm.
Mario Odyssey. And
Sure.
we're at Odyssey levels now. And even a game like Sunshine spends a lot of its time being cohesive and interesting and
Yeah.
sometimes throws stuff at the wall that doesn't stick. But I feel like the entire runtime of Bowser's Fury is idea, 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 and they're all kind of like fallen slimily down the wall. Nothing's really holding in place. And for me,
Sure.
that's disappointing because the strength of Mario is the tightness of design.
Hmm. Yeah. So I, throughout the game, I was feeling a lot of different ways about the open world aspect, about the different challenges that were placed around the map. I found a solid amount of them to be pretty interesting. I enjoyed the fact that you were able to approach them from multiple different angles. There's a lot of times where I felt that sort of Breath of the Wild thing where you can, or even Super Mario Sunshine, where you can feel like you cheesed a
Sure.
shine because you were clever with the platforming, clever with the placement of enemies and platforms around the area. There was one time where I was doing one of the ones where you have to get the key to the
Yeah.
front, and I was like looking around, like, well, I can just sort of like if I do a specific angle here, I can jump off with it and like angle myself down. And I angled myself and I stuck the key right in the slot right as I was landing on the ground. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's cool. I felt like I was cognizant of my surroundings. I knew the physics of how Mario can fall properly, and I was able to make that and feel like I was using my moveset and imagination with the world creatively. And I really wish that there had been more of that because I feel like the open design of it um, could lend itself to very interesting ways of yourself knowing Mario's moveset and power ups and things of that nature to complete the challenges in interesting ways. Unfortunately, a lot of them are too simplistic for that.
Yeah.
I think it's really obvious when you have just a bunch of challenges that are you hit the button and then like six enemies spawn and you're in a little box and you're like, well, I can kill six Goombas in 5 seconds. Like that's not really a shine worthy challenge there.
Yes.
Um, so I think there's an interesting balance here between cool concepts that do utilize the open world in interesting ways. But unfortunately, I don't think the Mario design team is necessarily fully ready to tackle that kind of creativity in their challenges. I mean, Odyssey obviously has a lot of creativity in your moveset, but your moveset is so much more limited here without Cappy that you don't get that ease and freedom of platforming. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there between the openness of the world, inviting freedom, and then the limitations of you just using the 3D Mario 3D World Mario moveset.
Yeah, so the movement I think is interesting and worth discussing. So for people who missed this little detail, both in Bowser's Fury and in the main 3D World game, the 3D World moveset from Wii U was really upgraded in a lot of ways to be faster, to have more movement options, and I think it pays dividends in both. I think 3D World, I already love that game on Wii, and we're going to be reviewing this, but I think it feels so much better to play on Switch. But in the context of Bowser's Fury, also I think the movement feels pretty good. I
Yeah,
like
I agree.
I like having the dive. I like the way that Mario straddles this gap. I think it almost for me finds a good balance between the floodless missions of Sunshine and the flood missions of Sunshine, where you have enough movement options and enough kind of assist things with power-ups, where you don't feel like platforming is punishing, but it doesn't feel overly easy. It doesn't feel like it's just going to hold your hand everywhere. So I like the way movement feels, but and this is a big issue that I feel it should have been addressed. The camera control is not good, and it's especially bad during when Bowser gets on his fucking Beyblade mode and starts ripping around
Yeah.
like
Big
wheelie and Kirby.
wheel mode.
Yeah, his big wheel mode, his wheelie mode from Kirby Superstar. When
Yeah.
he starts rolling around, I literally couldn't pan the camera fast enough. I don't know if there was a sensitivity thing I could have changed, but I also saw Imran Khan, the former informer, talking about this on Twitter. So I thought maybe it's not just me. I think there's certain elements of this moveset that just weren't ready for this type of gameplay
Yeah,
experience.
because I think that the openness of it is clearly what their main draw here was, and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're already doing 3D World upgrade. Let's just put him in that and see what happens. And I think there is a little bit of disconnect there. You're right. One thing that I do want to mention is I found the Fury Bowser fight not only from him just showing up and you having to like deal with him as you're small, but the Giga Bell fights that you had to continually do, I found those to be incredibly underwhelming. I was able to beat Fury Bowser once. He just ran into me and I was holding a block and then he's like, and he ran away. And I'm like, I didn't even do anything. Like the fight literally lasted 5 seconds. I have a video of it on my Switch.
Yeah.
But I think there's some interesting aspects of it. Like, okay, it's cool that you're now big and the areas are kind of platforms, like you can jump on them now that you're gigantic, but not really. They don't really do anything. I like that in concept, but I think it could have been more interesting in execution. But aside from that, I found it to be okay. He only has like 4 moves. I can dodge him.
Yeah.
I can throw the block. I can go over and ground pound on him. I'll be done in 30 seconds. And I especially found it to be repetitive and frustrating with that final battle where you're on freaking Cat Plessy and you just gotta keep going over those humps and jumping over the blocks that he's sending at you, and hopefully you got there fast enough so you can hit the bells into his belly. But that one especially, that was really underwhelming, and I found it to be super repetitive and not very mechanically complex. So while the spectacle of it is cool, the concept of a persistent boss is interesting, I don't think that it was designed well enough for me to feel like it was actually impactful.
So I disagree in some respects. I think that there was a lot of really easy and fun in-universe ways to make these fights more interesting. One that stuck out to me that I noticed and really stuck in my mind after a cool guy on Twitter, Metroid Mike 64, talked about it and posted a little video, is like, why can't you throw back to Mario 64? You pick up Fury Bowser by the tail,
Sure, swing him around.
swing him
Yeah.
around, throw him about. That would have been really fun. So there are ways that these fights could have been more complex, but I actually enjoyed them. I think they add a sense of weightiness to a Mario boss that we never really get, especially when you have like furry bullies and furry boom boom who go down in like
I'm so
30
tired of boom
seconds.
booms, man. I'm so tired of boom booms. If there's one boss fight from any video game I could remove, if I could get rid of boom boom fights, God, I would be a happy fucking camper. I'm so
Yes.
tired of fighting boom booms. Pom pom, not
Absolutely.
much better. Actually
No.
easier.
Yes. But I actually, for me, I think that the sense of scale and the weight that those boss fights had was really fun.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed the Plessy fight because challenging, and it felt like I really was fucking up a lot, and I couldn't get
Mhm.
there fast enough. And I recognized, okay, this is on me. I got to get better about when I'm diving, when I'm coming up. I really liked the ambiance. I just enjoy Plessy. I like that such a sideline character from 3D World was given a really fun,
Yeah.
use here. And so I thought the idea of this multi-stage fight where, okay, the lighthouses are no longer repelling Fury Bowser. I gotta just fucking get him right now. So I get
Mhm.
big, I knock him out, I turn him into regular Bowser. He's still kind of possessed. I hop on Plessy. We're rolling around the entire map. That was really fun for me. I think it actually is one of my favorite Nintendo boss fights.
Hmm.
And a lot of it I think has to do with the spectacle and the ambiance. But I do think that the gameplay is a little bit more satisfying, but I think that's also personal preference because like you said, I think especially the Fury fights because they happen way more often. The Plessy fight's really
Mhm.
one last thing. You could have
I
made
did
that
the
a little bit
Plessy
more
fight 3
complex.
times through my playthrough,
Oh, really?
which is probably why it was repetitive.
Why did you have to do it again?
In the end game, there's
Okay.
only the Plessy fights. Well, like if you beat Fury Bowser, you have
Yeah.
to do the Plessy fight. So I ended up having to do it 3 times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that getting tiresome then.
Yeah.
So if I was to boot up my file again, because I want to at least see those extra 15 that you're just talking about, the
Yeah.
the new post game ones.
Hmm.
Is Fury Bowser going to come back?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
It's kind of again a Breath of the Wild situation. Like you
Yeah.
didn't. Well, you canonically did beat him, but Bowser Jr. is like, gee, he sure still is angry. And you now have access to a small new area and a couple new things scattered across the map, including Captain Toadette has lost her buddies, and you have to go find them.
Okay.
And you can do the island challenges, and there are Plessy challenges, which are pretty fun. So there is an interesting new variety of things that are added to the map, but it doesn't change a ton, and you do have to do the. I was expecting there to be some sort of upgrade to the
Yeah.
fight, to the world, to the fight, to anything once you had gotten that 100%. But it's just the same one again, and I think that from my perspective, while I do enjoy the spectacle of it, the fact that the Plessy fight to end the game is essentially the same setup where he's spitting blocks at you and you have a ramp
Yeah.
like 12, 15 times in a circle. I think that if those had been spiced up a little bit different, a
Sure.
couple more block patterns, some things you had to steer around more precisely, I think that would have been interesting. But unfortunately, I do think that they kind of just placed the same scenario over and over and over
Yeah,
again.
that makes sense.
And I found that aspect of it to be pretty repetitive. Also, actual spoilers for the game, but if you 100% it, um, you get your Mario is permanently in a Giga Cat Mario costume, but small, and
Okay.
you get a cat skin for Bowser Jr. But at that point, you've completed the game, so there's no reason to go back
Sure.
and you see them at all. I took one screenshot, but that's about it. And I think that sort of is emblematic of my biggest issue with Bowser's Fury is because while I really did enjoy the gameplay and I think that there is a lot of cool ideas there, and on the whole, I think it's a very solid collectathon experience with a fun Mario spin on it. It doesn't do enough to set itself apart. What
Yeah.
it does is make everything to catch, which is only aesthetic and doesn't change anything. It doesn't have enough of its own new ideas in terms of enemies, in terms of power-ups, in terms of level mechanics to feel like it warrants being its own thing. And the story, the cutscenes, all of that are, I think, incredibly underwhelming and don't really do anything to set itself apart because I was just expecting there to be a little more grandioseness to this entire thing.
Yeah.
So much of the production value went into the Fury Bowser fight, which does look great, which does have that spectacle, which does have that grandioseness, but everything around it, from the perspective of the cutscenes and framing of the story and everything, it's a little bit simplistic for my taste. And I think that with all of this stuff that they've given us, reworking it into something larger with a little more polish allowed to it, and new ideas, new mechanics that are placed into this open world format, mixed with the idea that you can, get power-ups, that you can, or get a bunch of power-ups rather, you can have a boss fight that's always fighting you. I think there's a lot of potential here, but it just has not quite been realized yet.
Yeah, I feel like unrealized potential is the takeaway from Bowser's Fury. Like you, I did have fun with it. I think that I actually really enjoy the soundtrack. I think that the music is a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
music is good.
I think that the actual world itself is interesting, like how aesthetically cohesive it is, while still integrating a lot of its unique ideas in terms of locations, in terms of little gameplay moments. So I think there's a lot of fun to be had. Like I said, riding around in Plessy is fun. Getting to experiment with the world is fun. Like you said, finding corners to cut is always fun, I think, and
Mhm.
finding your own ways to collect shines. So I did enjoy myself. I just found myself often questioning a lot of the design decisions, questioning, okay, so why is X the way it is, and what does this really mean moving forward? And as we talked about a little bit in our last video about Bowser's Fury, I think that you can apply a lot of these ideas to a bigger Mario game,
Mhm.
but you also need to have a little bit more of a strong through line, both in terms of narrative, in terms of gameplay structure, just taking all these ideas and putting them in a context where they work together properly instead of just all kind of working in the same bucket.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm I'm glad I played it. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily feel disappointed because it is tangential to the 3D World package.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to review 3D World with you.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I think that's where I'm ready to leave it.
Yeah, so a few final things is, again, I am also not disappointed. I feel like I've been pretty critical throughout, but it was a breezy 6 hours that took me to
Yeah.
100% it. There were a few small design decisions that I think sort of bogged down my experience nearing the
Yeah.
end when you're going to that 100%. But on the whole, I think it is a really fun, small, contained experience with a lot of cool ideas, and I think it could be pretty influential going forward in the Mario series. Um, but also, I just want to say that will you consider this as part of your Super Mario or your 3D Mario rankings? Are you going to put it there separately? Because I have.
Um I don't know. I think I have to think about that a little bit more. I don't have a great analog. That's the thing. I was trying to think what would be a good test case. I was kind of thinking Astro, and I rank Astro as its own experience, and so I think I would have to rank Bowser's Fury as its own experience. I
Yeah,
think I would have to. It would certainly be at the bottom for me, um,
sure.
but
Yeah, for me, it's also near the bottom. It's only above 3D Land because I just think
sure,
it's a
sure.
more coherent and engaging video game experience than 3D Land was for me. But I do think it's pretty solidly below all of the other mainline big Mario games because,
Yeah,
and I think this is sort of my closing thoughts is that Mario games, 3D Mario games especially, are the crown jewels of the consoles that they're on. They're the
yeah.
pinnacles of the industry. They're Nintendo showing what they can do. And this is the first time we're getting something that's half down there. It's 2/3 down. It's not long enough. It's not big enough. It doesn't have enough of its own ideas. And it really does feel out of place in the 3D Mario series. We've never gotten anything like this before. And I wouldn't be surprised if we never got anything like it again. This is such a unique and interesting case. What am I thinking of? Test case. I don't know, something like that. But it does. You do have to question: is it its own game? Do you count it as such? Is it just an expansion? If so, how do you consider that when rating 3D World plus Bowser's Fury? Like I think it's a weird package that I think comes with a lot of compelling content, but Bowser's Fury in itself is just such a weird one-off deal that it kind of boggles my mind when considering how I want to think about it and rate it and such.
It almost feels like, because what's so weird about it is it aside from using the assets in the engine, a lot of the gameplay blocks of 3D World,
Yeah,
it's completely different. It
yeah.
feels in a lot of ways like it was stuck onto 3D World to make sure that fans who already bought 3D World also buy the Switch version,
Hmm.
because a lot of the more hardcore interest from players who did have a Wii U was in Bowser's Fury, of course.
Hmm.
It feels like this could have been released as like a $20-$30 downloadable title,
100%. Yeah.
um, but it wasn't. It was put into this package. So I definitely, when I'm ranking 3D Mario's, I would always rank 3D World by itself.
Yes.
But we will be ranking the 3D Mario's, I think and hope, once we've
Sure.
reviewed 3D World and we have all of them under our belts. But I think we've
Sans Galaxy 2 for me.
That's fine. I haven't played Galaxy 2 in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're done here.
I think we're done. It was fun talking about Bowser's Fury. I'm glad I played it, and we'll just see how it goes into the future.
Yes.
It's doing construction. What the fuck?
That's really loud. A White Bros Dairy food service truck is backing up towards the dining hall right now.
Delivering your ice cream.
It's a smooth motion. It's just one because here's the thing, he's got to go around this curve, but he did it so elegantly.
Wow.
No decrease in speed. Frankly, he might have been going a little bit too fast.
Well, he did it.
He did it. No kids got killed.
I'm proud of him.
That I can see.
Looking for child corpses? Whoa! Now that invigorated me.